So joining us today, we have Ink with the Locust God, otherwise known as Exodus 10, 3 through 6. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Ink, and I started playing Magic, I think, around 3 years ago, so pretty fresh. I fell in love with it. One of my best friends, he showed me this, and, it started off with us just playing with the precons, and then I was like, okay, I want to build a deck for myself, and this was that very first deck that I built for myself. All from scratch, nothing online.
I need to start just asking this question as is. What is your home plane? What was the first plane you interacted with as a Magic player?
The first plane I interacted with was, I think, Innistrad Midnight Hunt.
Okay.
But the first one I actually started buying product for was Kamigawa Neon Dynasty.
Okay, those are solid sets to come into.
Oh yeah.
Because I feel like Crimson Vow and its sister set were really a decent draft.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kamigawa just hit a home run on everything.
Yeah, no, I love that set.
Yeah, so how did you land on the Locust God? What was the play there?
I'm a big fan of dragons. So I was first looking through I would just go on my phone and I'd type in cool MTG dragons. Okay. I'd look through all the different legendary creatures there, and then eventually I came across Niv Mizzet. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I love blue. Blue's my personal favorite color. And just, the Izzet combo is just perfect to me. I was already in the ordering tab, and then it's a recommended card popped up, and it was the Locust God. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I was like, that is awesome. So I scrapped the entire thing right before I was about to order it, and changed the deck to the Locust God, and built around that.
I think Locust God is so much cooler of a design space than Niv Mizzet ever was.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, okay, cool. Was it still Spellslinger as the way you wanted it to be, or?
So originally I built it because I still love Niv Mizzet, so I threw every single Niv Mizzet card in this deck. More or less Locust God Spellslinger, and with a pairing of all the Niv Mizzets. So it was kind of a weird mixture of just drawing cards and token generation.
Right.
So, but then as I've been building this deck and learning more about Magic, I diverted away from that, and now I kind of just jam-packed on, the wheels and cantrips and drawing and stuff like that.
Right. Well, I see there's not any Niv Mizzet representation in the deck anymore.
Yeah, it was a hard cut, but eventually people convinced me to cut the Niv Mizzets.
Well, do you remember if you cut them all at once, or was it do you remember the last one that you cut?
The very last one, I believe, was Niv Mizzet Perun.
Okay.
Just because that one was the best Niv Mizzet, whereas the other ones were kind of not as great. It took me so long to eventually cut Niv Mizzet Perun out of this deck.
Yeah, you got a couple combos that work well with the Locust God. I mean, the Locust God came as a prerequisite for those decks for a long time, so it makes a lot of sense that they kind of buddied up for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about it, and we've kind of brushed a little bit on combo, and usually if you say Spellslinger, some people start already getting itchy in the back of their skulls, being like, oh, is it a CEDH deck? What not needing to go off of any established scale system, but what tables would you bring this deck to? Is this a CDH deck? Is it?
At my local play group, we kind of just play off of each other's decks. Okay. So this is my powerhouse deck. Okay. So this is the deck that I bring out if someone else brings out. For example, another person has a really good Lord Xander the Collector deck, which it is disgusting. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to play that deck. Oh, okay, I'll match you. I'll play Locust God. And everyone's like, oh. If someone plays something anything that just directly counters me, obviously, if they're playing a mono white Elish Norn deck, or I don't really want to just feed people with my deck. I want to actually, be at a pretty competent position at the board. But I just hate pub stomping. Yeah. So I'll always bring this deck out to where either I'm the mid-range person or someone matching. I never being the person with that deck.
So you would say that this was more of yep, this is my I want to flex but not quite CDH?
Yeah, so this is just the deck that it's my pet deck, and if someone else plays a high power deck, I'll match them.
How is it playing a 6-mana commander?
It is brutal, let me tell you. Like, the hardest part of the deck is getting to the point where you can get your commander out. It does help a lot to have the third ability of the Locust God, where if he dies, you can return him to your hand at the next end step, so you can avoid commander tag. Yeah. But just getting to that point, it requires at least, I would say, maybe four turns, like, consistently, I would say.
I mean, that's still pretty good ramp if, like, you can consistently do, like, a 6-mana commander on 4. And, like,
Yeah.
if he's already online, you probably have some draw engines and stuff that help out.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Is the deck built around the Locust God's second ability?
Yeah, so the whole deck just focuses on swarming the board with tokens. I have about 30 custom-made tokens for this deck, and I still consistently run it.
That's fucking awesome. If you just have, like, 30 of these things.
Yep.
So wait, for those tokens, do you just get, like, do you just draw them when, like, someone's taking, like, 50 hours on their turn? Or do you have people draw them, or?
Sometimes I draw them, but the ones that I use on a regular basis, I have ordered off of a proxy making website.
Okay.
So these are art proxies made by other people, and then I just took a handful of every single art and then just ordered like 10 of each.
No, that's cool. I played with a couple of people that played Locust God, and I know their philosophy with the Locust God tokens is that they just get the exact same token and then order like 100 of them, because eventually they're just gonna slam the whole stack down onto the table, and it's like, hey, you know what locusts do in real life, right? They destroy the board and then they just go for it. Okay, let's get into some of like the meat and potatoes of the deck. I always think it's really funny that Moxfield puts Planeswalkers straight to the top, because Planeswalkers are always really spicy. By and large, Planeswalkers can be kind of bad, but if a Planeswalker makes it into the deck, it's like, hey, this one's gonna be good. And
Oh yeah.
I don't even know if your singular Planeswalker needs much of an introduction. But I do have a funny story about Narset Parter of Veils.
It is great, yeah.
So I'm gonna ask this, and it's just kind of my question for all Narset players. Do you ever activate her, or do you just let her sit?
If I'm desperate, if my hand is as dry as can be and I am ever so close to that win, I will use the activated ability. If not, it will never get touched.
You're just like, yep, she's gonna sit out there with 5. Don't worry, guys. Oh, shoot. It's a really funny story. I really hate this card, but not for the reasons that everyone else hates it.
Oh.
So occasionally I will play like 1 or 2 stax pieces in a deck, but like I have like an enchantments deck, and I have energy flux in there because there's no artifacts in the whole deck. And energy flux says at the beginning of your upkeep, you pay some amount of mana or sacrifice any of your artifacts. Like each artifact has that text, so you have to pay for each one of your artifacts. And it's like, oh,
it's similar to Tabernacle.
Oh, yeah. It does have like the Tabernacle text, but just for that. But it itself is an enchantment, so I'm like, oh, it goes in my enchantment deck. And oh, I'm not playing any artifacts. That'll be fine. And like occasionally it'll screw over exactly one person really hard, but it's lightly annoying to everyone else.
Yeah.
And so I won't like overdo it. And like Narset is like a draw stacks piece, and I don't play her in any deck. I have 7 copies of her, because every time she gets reprinted, I pull one.
Wow.
And it drives me insane. Whenever I see Parter Avail, I'm just like, God damn it. So there's my tangent for the day. But let's get back to Locust God. What would you say like the strengths of this deck is?
So this deck, it works so well with just rifting through your deck to find the pieces that you need. Like if you have, a couple pieces on and your commander's out, you're going to be drawing, I would say, at minimum a quarter of your deck in that one turn, assuming that, you're barely, scraping the barrel with resources. It's strong once it's out. But the biggest weakness is getting to that point. Getting to where you can have your 6-mana commander out with enough pieces on board. Because if anyone sees Locust God, they're going to automatically target you no matter what. That's how it is every game. It's just a part of that you have to accept. So you kind of got to play around that, which is why I have just so many pieces in this deck dedicated to getting my commander out. So I'll never have just my commander out on the board. I'll always have something else.
I haven't seen somebody play Sorcerer Class before. I didn't even realize it was a card for a while.
Sorcerer Class is very nice in this deck.
so I'm kind of quickly reading over it, but like, what does this card do for your deck?
So Sorcerer Class, it's essentially 2 mana, which you can use that to draw 2, discard 2, which if you have your commander out, obviously, boom, 2 insects, all right? And the biggest part about Locust God's insects that make them so good in this deck is the haste. The haste is, oh my god. The biggest upside about Sorcerer Class is it's essentially a 4 mana, turn all of your insects into mana dorks. So all of those 1/1 insects that you get off of cards, you can use that to tap for blue and red. And since this deck has so many sorceries and instants that you're using to riffle through that deck, you're essentially just getting spells for free at that point. It's like a mini omniscience.
Okay.
And that final ability is pretty much it's an alternate win con in this deck.
Oh shoot. Oh, so it's almost like a Storm Impact Tremors type deal?
Pretty much, yeah.
Interesting. See, I'd never seen this card before. Like that.
Yeah, I was looking through my pile of Adventures into the Forgotten Realm cards, and I was like, oh crap, that is really good.
You know, I feel like I'm just gonna be another person that's just like, hey, we didn't all pay attention to that set when it came out hard enough.
Yeah, that set had so much spice in it, I must say.
Also, while I'm kind of looking at your enchantments like page, I see Underworld Breach. I've seen a couple people use loot effects in like 2 different ways. One is kind of just like a Hail Mary, like they go more of the red side where they're like, okay, I'm gonna just riffle through my deck and like it'd be damned if it goes into my graveyard. And then I've seen the other side of it where they're like, I want to put specific things into my graveyard. So I see Underworld Breach is there. Do you lean more into the like you'll pitch things to your graveyard and then forget about it, or do you play like the it's my second hands type of effect?
So for Underworld Breach, I use that more or less as something to just repeat those wheels, because I only have so many wheels in my actual library.
Okay.
So that's more or less like, I would say, yeah, like my Hail Mary. I don't use it for any, I guess, quote unquote combo lines. Like, yeah, I have, like Seething Song and Dockside, but aside from that, I don't have anything that can win me the game using just Underworld Breach and one other thing.
Okay.
Like, there's no lines, I guess, in this deck that necessarily need Underworld Breach.
Yeah.
It's more just something so I can repeat the actually really good wheels in this deck, like either Molten Psyche, which I can help use to win the game, or I can use something like Time Warp, just constantly recast Time Warp over and over again and just get infinite number of turns, basically.
Okay. Do you have other things? Like I see like Echo of Eons has like a flashback. I also see a Treasure Cruise in here for like Delve. Do you have an expectation of like using your graveyard all that much?
Aside from those 2 effects, actually, I don't necessarily super care about my graveyard. Other than Underworld Breach, I don't run anything to really riffle it back in, because that's why I have a few wheels that shuffle specifically my graveyard and my library back into my deck. My deck, like Time Reversal, Echo of Eons, I think there's one more, but other than that, it's kind of limited when I come to that. I'm trying to just get enough money to where I can get just a Shuffle Titan for my deck, but until that point, it's just something that I use to just make my turns go an extra 10 minutes. It's when I do brick, when I wheel, which does happen, it happens every now and then. I can't, what can you do, right? So that's why I have just like stuff that gets me that repeatable wheeling effects. Like I'll keep a Jace's Archivist on taps just in case I brick, but most of the time it's just kind of something you have to deal with if you don't have interaction in hand.
Right. Is there any other like fun includes that like you haven't seen in other Locust God decks?
Some cards that I do have in here that I wouldn't say yet to see, but I've very rarely seen is Mana Echoes. This card I came across, and I have never played against a single Locust God deck that actually used it. And I was taken aback. I was like, whoa. I got it when it was really cheap. I think I got it for like $15.
Yeah, it looks like
and
like 30.
The second I read that text, I was like, oh my god, this is busted.
And it's like a crazy accelerant card too. It doesn't read like a CDH card because it just doesn't go fast enough for CDH. But for like power decks, like it's always kind of strange to see like where the line is, because like it's like, oh yeah, this is super strong and it's decently expensive. Yeah, it's not a CDH card. But even if he didn't trigger when like the insects came in, if you wheel getting like 7 insects,
it's a buttload of mana.
Yeah.
Though notably with it, you do get mana just off of the one creature entering. So like why I like it so much is, say I play my commander, I'll still get 1 floating colorless just for him entering by himself.
Do you have a pet card for the deck where it's like you just like the card, or you think it's like particularly spicy and are happy to see it?
Oh yeah. So my biggest pet card in this deck is Library of Lang. I have put it in so many decks, and I constantly keep recommending it to people, and it still is not caught on. But especially if you play any deck that just, you know, you have a lot of looting effects or you wheeling, as for this deck, it's so good.
For viewers at home, this card, it's an older card and it's got like a weird print to it. So I'm gonna read the actual effect for the card, just so that way like everyone's on the same page. So the weird rules thing that like I've been having to teach a lot of new players. So you always end your turn with a discard phase. Even if you do something, it like resets it and puts a new discard phase. So there's no way to avoid discarding the hand size. Technically, you still do it even if you are no max hand size, because you discard down to your no max hand size, but you don't skip your discard phase. So the way the Library of Lang reads is you have no maximum hand size, and then it says if an effect would cause you to discard a card, discard it, but you may put it on the top of your library instead of your discard, or into your graveyard. I have seen that card before, and I usually don't do a whole lot of discard effects, and I don't play with too many people that are making me discard cards. But I have seen Library of Lang come up in a couple different like instances, and for it being like a buck or two, is a really solid card in the right decks.
Oh yeah. I love white border personally. Like if I can, yes, I'm a sucker for white border, and I always have been. All of my old decks are white border lands.
I was thinking about it because I like looked through this a little bit and I'm like, there's a strange number of like white borders. Is this list accurate to which prints you have?
Yeah, so the reason why a lot of these are like really like different arts and stuff is just because this is pretty much stuff that either me or my friends have pulled, and I was like, oh hey, you know, I could use that in a deck. But if I can get my hands on a white bordered card, I will choose that over any other art. It's just I don't go to like a game store often.
Oh yeah. Are you excited that we're getting some more white border cards?
Oh yes, very very excited.
Do you think they look good? I've heard some discourse that like they don't look like old white border cards because they still have like new frames and stuff like that.
So I'm not the biggest fan of them. Like if I can choose having the OG white border over the Mystery Booster 2 white border, I would choose the OG one. But if there isn't an available one, I will choose the Mystery Booster.
Okay.
The only reason why I didn't choose white border for my basics is because I chose the Amonkhet ones just to stay on theme with the deck.
Yeah, no, I saw that. I was looking at lands, and like that was one of the last things that I was going to kind of touch on a little. So I see you got 33 lands, including MDFCs. I know it's like purposely like you're wheeling and dealing and that kind of stuff. Like, do you find yourself missing land drops all that often, or you feel pretty comfortable with how it goes?
With this deck specifically, I would say I don't need as many lands as normal people. Like I would say most people I have played against and talked to run around 35 lands in their just, you know, non-green decks. So I used to run around 35 just because my commander was so high, but as I kept putting money into the deck and as I kept on getting different artifacts, like for example I got both altars, right, which effectively turn my insects into mana. The second my commander comes out, I literally don't need lands. All of my mana is produced by like mana echoes and my different altars and stuff, where it's like exactly.
I see you got Odawara. You chose not to put the other of the Kamigawa lands in. Was that a choice, or was that like you just didn't find one, or?
See, I don't really need it. Like, I don't think that's really necessary to go out of my way to try to get it. Like, almost all these cards are me considering whether or not I want to actually go out and have to buy one, because I'm more of a guy that loves to trade cards, if anything.
I wish more people were like that. I started bringing a trade binder. I went to one of the Magic Cons and I brought a trade binder just for funsies, and I started like a trade war. Like we started a stock market like right in the middle of the whole thing, just because like
Oh wow.
2 people had their binders open. Someone else was like, "Ooh, I want to go look. Oh, I just pulled this. You want to trade?" And then they're sitting talking about trades, and then someone else is like, "Oh, are we trading?" And then they pull out a binder, and it just escalated. And I love like just being able to trade like that and do those types of things.
Oh yeah, so like if I go anywhere, I'll put my trade binder in my cart just in case I end up going to a game store and there's an event going on.
Oh, that's cool. I forgot to look at the curve at the bottom of the deck. You actually have like a really low bell curve, surprisingly, as compared to like most decks. Usually it'll have more 4 and 5 drops to kind of close out the game. I'm getting the sense that it was like your commander kind of becomes like your pivot point.
Essentially, it's the deck. I don't need any game finishers. Like all of my real game finishers are, only 3 mana. So it's like, if I wanted to, I probably could just, get like a burn spell for the deck or something big, to slam on the board. But it's just, if I can cut the deck down to where I'm not spending 5 mana on one thing, as opposed to something I can do similar effects but cheaper, I'll choose the latter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it makes sense because then you have options like more throughout the game and everything else. You're talking about cards in the deck. Would you say are your finishers?
My consistent win cons in this deck that I just win almost all the time with is Laboratory Maniac, Perforos, Molten Gatekeeper, and Psychosis Crawler. Those 3 all do similar effects where it's Molten Gatekeeper and Perforos, both whenever a creature comes into play, it deals 1 or 2 damage, and then Psychosis Crawler, whenever I draw a card, each opponent loses a life. All of the effects in this deck that ping people for damage whenever my creatures come into play or draw me cards, those are all my win cons. I don't really need one or the other. If I just have one of them, most of the time I say I can win with that turn. Like, because I also have Impact Tremors, Goblin Bombardment. All those choices are just stuff where it's like, if I have that, win the game with just that.
I guess kind of rounding out like last minute thoughts. Do you find that like you'll keep like a pretty full grip of cards? Like do the wheels that you have usually keep you at 7?
Assuming my game is like, not one of those weird games where you're getting screwed over on one particular thing.
Right.
Most of the time I can keep like a consistent, 7. If everything's like, I'm not just dumping my whole hand on one turn, right? I can keep that 7 cards in hand. Any early game, like early game as in like turn 5, turn 4, and my commander isn't on board with any of my other pieces, I'll have around 6, 7 cards in hand. But then once my commander's out and I have a piece, I'll always dig for a no max hand size card or something like that. I'll have like a grip of like 15, 16 cards.
That's awesome. I think I've played against this deck before. But
Yeah.
I'm always kind of like interested to see like how like the deck's actual like bones work. I like this is a cool one. I thought I knew like the like Locust God like wheels type thing, but you got some stuff in here I wouldn't have thought to put in a deck. It definitely like shines through really well.
Yeah, I tried to keep it not super cookie cutter with the deck. Like obviously I want to put, Consecrated Sphinx in the deck and then, the good removal and interaction. But other than that, I want to keep the soul in the deck, if you know what I mean.
You didn't do the optimal thing, but you have a reason to play it, and that's way more interesting than like, oh yeah, here is all of the free spells, and then like, here's 5 proxies of the like old school wheels and stuff like that, and like, you got a lot of really cool things in here. This is cool.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, do you got any final parting words for anybody interested in wheeling and dealing or playing the Locust God?
If you play a deck like this, you have to keep in mind that you're going to be the archenemy very, very fast. So you kind of have to keep the mindset where you won't get upset if your board's constantly getting removed. Because you kind of got to come in with the mindset where it's like, okay, someone's within the next turn or two, someone's going to try their best to get rid of Locust God. So it's kind of, you got to brace yourself for that mentally. So that's why I built the deck kind of where it can function without the commander, at least for a little bit.
Yeah. And then like once you can get your commander to stick, you just like you put your foot on the gas. Oh, I'm not familiar. What's the name of the deck's meaning?
So the name of the deck is actually a Bible quote. So I actually have it in my primer here for the deck.
Okay.
I'm not like a crazy religious person, but like one of my friends mentioned it to me, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll read the Bible quote for you." Chapter 10, verses 3 through 6, and it's, "So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, 'This is what the Lord, the God of Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will bring locusts into your country tomorrow. They will cover the face of the ground so it cannot be seen. They will devour what little you have left after the hail, including every tree that is growing in your fields. They will fill your houses and those of all your officials and all the Egyptians, something neither your parents nor your ancestors have ever seen from the day they have settled in this land till now.' Then Moses turned and left the Pharaoh."